Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for Managing Director, the People Analytics Program Inside 222, David Green.
Zena, thank you very much, and you've certainly woken me up, because it's 4:30 in the morning in the UK at the moment, so I don't think I'm going to have too much of a problem. So, firstly, I love being in India. It's a really vibrant country, and there's a real passion and thirst for learning here about HR and analytics, which I don't really see anywhere else in the world. And let's just say, it's very rare that you come to a conference and there are people queuing at the door to hear about data, so I'm really excited about that. I'd also like to say a big thank you to Esther, Saumya and Sashi from the People Matters team for inviting me to speak here. I think you'll agree they've put together a fantastic conference, and I think we'll start with a round of applause for the People Matters team. So, as Zena said, my name's David Green. I started writing a lot about people analytics about 5 or 6 years ago when it wasn't very fashionable to do so. And it's been great to see the popularity of analytics now and how it's kind of moved from the core of, the periphery of HR towards the core, and is a key foundation now of everything that we're trying to do new and exciting within the HR space. So yes, I'm the Managing Director of Insight 222's People Analytics Program, and what that actually means is we work with 60 large organizations around the world and helping them to put people analytics at the center of business. I'm often asked, why do you like data so much? And I have to admit, it's because of this sport, cricket. So as a small boy, I used to pore over statistics and averages and try and understand why Kapil Dev always got my favorite player, David Gower, out whenever England played India. And you wouldn't expect an Englishman to not make the excuse in India and remind everyone that England are now the World Cup winners. When I was at my cricket club watching the World Cup final, which, trust me, was, I don't know if any of you here watched the World Cup final or knew about it. It could have been one of the most exciting cricket matches of all time. A tie, a super over, still a tie, and England winning because they scored the most boundaries, which is not the best way to win a cricket match, I would say. But when I was talking to my friends at the cricket club, and said I was coming out to India on the first day of the Ashes, which kicks off today, I did sort of remind them that actually one of my fellow speakers in this conference who's speaking tomorrow is Anil Kumble, who is without doubt one of the best cricket players that I've seen in the last 20 years. So I'm really looking forward to seeing him tomorrow. I'm not going to talk too much more about cricket, so we are going to talk a bit more about what's happening out there in the world, and Esther highlighted that, I think, in her introduction. You know, I don't know about the rest of you, but I don't think we've ever experienced a time when there is so much change happening in our world, both politically, economically, socially. Certainly coming from the UK, there's a lot of change happening at the moment. I won't say whether I agree with some of the things that are happening. I'll be quiet about that. But let's just say there's a lot of change happening. And Gartner, they do a report every quarter, their Emerging Risks report. And interestingly, the biggest concern of CEOs around the world at the moment is the pace of change that is happening. And I think it's probably something that we can all adhere to. So, not going to go into all of these 8 forces now, because you're going to hear a lot about these over the next few days, and Esther mentioned a couple of them in her introduction. I think this focus on rapid technology change. I mean, we are seeing, we're hearing a lot of stuff about the future of work. We're hearing a lot of stuff about technology that's going to replace us in the workforce. I like to look at history, and history suggests that we're at a time of big change. There is a lot of jobs that will be displaced, but there are a lot of more new jobs that will be created. But what this means for companies, of course, is it's very difficult to plan. How do we know what skills that we need in 2 to 3 years' time, and where are we going to get those skills from, and where in the world are we going to get those skills from? And should we be hiring people on a permanent basis? Should we be hiring contractors or freelancers? Or should we even be outsourcing this business, or maybe buying a company that can give us these skills? A lot of change happening there. Obviously, a lot of more competition that's going on, new entrants coming into markets and dominating markets. Greater employee expectations. I mean, one of the things that analytics is really helping to do is personalize the employee experience. And I'll talk a little bit about that as well. I'm also going to talk about the growth in data. The amount of data that we leave as consumers is incredible. You think of all those social media applications that you're doing and how that data is being used by those social media companies. Well, it's similar in the workplace. The amount of data or digital exhaust that we leave our employees is phenomenal. And only now really are organizations starting to look at that data and starting to analyze it to see how it can help drive business performance and an improved employee experience as well. And certainly one of the things I think you're going to see out there is the choice of technology that's available to you as HR professionals is growing all the time. India has got one of the most exciting and vibrant HR tech markets in the world, and certainly I recognized a lot of the names of the sponsors that Zena put up. So why do we care about analytics? Why do we care about data? Well, a report that Accenture published earlier this year suggested that if the 600 largest, this is just the value from the 600 largest, the 600 largest publicly listed companies in the world, if they could get the value that they, in their workforce data that they have, they could get the maximum value out of it using that data responsibly, the combined benefit to them is $3 trillion, which I think we'd agree that we'd like that a share of that in our own organizations. So a couple of examples there. So IBM, since they started their workforce analytics team back in 2010, the first business problem that they looked at was flight risk. And they put a flight risk model in place to try and retain great people within IBM to give an early warning signal if people were potentially about to leave the organization. That has saved IBM around $300 million since it was put in. Laszlo Bock, when he was at Google, has shared a story about how just by putting a small nudge to help new hires settle quicker, that has helped save Google $400 million over a one-year period. And you'll hear from Lena Nair tomorrow, the CHRO of Unilever. Unilever have calculated for every dollar they invest in employee wellness, they get a $2.5 return, which is a pretty significant amount. So we can make money from it, which is good. It's not surprising then, more and more companies are starting to adopt people analytics. So this is a report that was published by the Corporate Research Forum that says that 69% of large organizations now have a people analytics team. It's not just large organizations, and I was talking at the start there, Bosch have just set up a people analytics function in India to build on the work that's already been done from the headquarters in Germany. But it's also smaller organizations as well. So LinkedIn did a study last year, and they found that 22% of all organizations that are listed on LinkedIn have done something in the people analytics space, which is such a massive rise since 5 or 6 years ago when I came into the space. So more organizations means more people. LinkedIn did some research last year, and they did this regionally, and they actually looked on LinkedIn and looked, let's look at all the people who are registered on LinkedIn. Let's see the increase in the number of people who list HR or people analytics as a skill. And they found that there was in the Asia Pacific region, which they include India in that, they found that there was a 70% increase over the last 5 years. And actually, if you look elsewhere in the world, similar level of increase in North America. And in Europe, they actually found that there was a 61% increase in just one single calendar year from May 2017 to May 2018. So there are more and more people coming into the space with doing HR analytics or people analytics. And a lot of the people that are coming into these jobs are people who are coming from outside HR with statistical backgrounds, but also HR people themselves who really understand how to actually translate some of that people data into an HR language and actually get the business to take action on it. So we ran a study at myhrfuture.com, which is part of Insight 222. Please feel free to check out some of the articles that I publish on there. We asked HR practitioners themselves, if there was one skill, and this was a free text answer, if there's one skill that you could learn in 2019, what would it be? And people analytics was the skill that overwhelmingly came back as the skill that people most wanted to learn. You'll see the other top 6 that were there. We're often asked about the other box. That was about 70 different skills. And there were some people who said they didn't need to learn any skills in HR. So find out who those people are. You might want to hire them, you might not, because I think everyone still needs to learn, particularly in this world that we're in. And if you scan that QR code, you can actually get a copy of that report for free as well. And I think the slides will be provided afterwards so that we can go through those again. So what are companies using people analytics for? Well, they're using it for a variety of different things. And what I've tried to do there is split out business outcomes versus people outcomes. It is about driving positive business outcomes, of course, but it's also about driving people outcomes. You saw one of the big trends is, employees are expecting a similar experience at work as they get as consumers, personalized, actually being able to get insights about their own data to help them become more productive at work, may have a better work-life balance, improve performance, drive their career. So there's all these types of things that organizations are doing. We're going to talk about a few of those now. So when we were setting up Insight 222 about 18 months ago, and this is after I'd spent a few years at IBM, Jonathan and I, who's two of the co-founders, we reflected on questions that we'd been asked by organizations over the previous 5 years around people analytics. And we categorized them into 3 main buckets. Okay, it wasn't all of them, but let's say it was about 90% of questions. So it was either a chief HR officer or a new head of people analytics or someone within the business. How can I improve the impact of my people analytics function? How can I actually start to drive business value out of this? How can I create value? How can I actually quantify the work that the team are doing and actually derive what the financial value of that is or the benefit to employees? And what should I focus on? There's so much to think about when you're putting a people analytics team together. It's building the team. It's actually working with stakeholders in the business. What work should I do? What technology should I use? There's so much choice out there. What about data? There's so many challenges around data. What should I focus on? So we built this model, and I'm going to be talking about this in detail in the workshop for those of you that are coming along on Saturday, and we're going to touch on it again tomorrow in the masterclass. So we built the model that says 9 dimensions, and we basically studied around 100 different organizations, or we'd worked with them directly. And we saw that companies that are really good at people analytics and translating the work into value were good at these 9 different dimensions. In fact, we didn't find one company who was excellent at all 9, but we do find companies that are of excellence in different buckets there. So again, we haven't got the time to go into all of this now, but having the right foundation in place and the right governance behind it, of course, is very important. Working with the right stakeholders in the business. Having that balance between the resources of having the right skills or access to the right skills within the organization or from a partner. The right technology, data, of course, not just people data or HR data, but actually access to business data as well. And then the value part, which we're going to talk about now. So let's start with business outcomes. So how can we drive value from our people analytics investments? How can we get some ROI? And again, some more stats just to highlight that companies that are very good at doing people analytics tend to do better as businesses as well. Now, these are correlations, not causations, but they're interesting correlations nevertheless. Higher stock prices, higher return on equity, and higher profit margins. These are companies that have advanced capability in people analytics from various studies. The big tip, if you take one thing away from this speech today, if you're working in a people analytics role, you're looking to build that capability within your organization, don't start with the data. Start with the business problem that you're trying to solve. We need to open a new office in Singapore, for example, or we need to drive more sales, or we need to stop our best people leaving the organization. Start with the business question, and that involves working with the business. We can't do this in isolation within HR. We need to work with key stakeholders within the business as well, and build some hypotheses around why things might be happening, and we can use analytics to test that. One of the other misnomers of people analytics is, a lot of stuff that's written, suddenly everyone in HR needs to become a statistician or an analyst. That's not true. The middle work, stages 3 to 5, is done by specialists. It is done by people who have got statistics backgrounds or data science backgrounds, people who can actually put that data together, clean the data, conduct the analysis on the data, and get some insights from it. But they can't do it alone. They need to work with people who have an interface into the business to understand what the business questions are. And they also need to work with people who can translate some of those findings into actual real business actions. and actually get people to take action on these things as well within the business. People analytics, it's change management at the end of the day. It's a change for HR to take a more data-driven approach to their work, but B, there's an actual change management process to actually implement some of the findings from people analytics as well. So don't underestimate the amount of work that's involved in this. But as I said, the first thing is really do start with the business question. So a couple of examples. So this is from Virgin Media. This is an example from the UK. And this is also a proof that actually you don't need to do, it's not always the most sophisticated analytics cases that actually drive some really tangible results. So Virgin Media is a B2C company. They provide mobile phones, televisions, and stuff like that. Basically, multimedia company. So mainly it's a B2C organization. And their head of recruiting had a hypothesis that they were providing such a bad candidate experience that actually people were leaving, that actually they were turning customers off. So as a B2C company, you recognize that some of the people applying for jobs to work at your organization are also customers. And he thought, and his team thought, gee, this candidate experience is so bad. I'm actually scared that these people are having such a bad experience, they're canceling their subscription and moving to one of our competitors. So he took his recruiting data and this hypothesis to the consumer analytics team. So this is the team based in marketing. So this is where he actually tried to leverage skills and data from elsewhere in the organization rather than just relying on HR data, and said, is this something that you'd be interested in investigating? And of course they were interested in investigating it, because the role of the consumer analytics team is to maximize customer revenue, customer loyalty, customer satisfaction. So they ran some data. It wasn't particularly sophisticated, as I said, or particularly complicated. And they found a big finding. They found that within 4 weeks of being in the recruitment process, over the course of a 12-month period, 7,500 Virgin Media customers had cancelled their subscriptions within 4 weeks of being in the recruitment process, which is quite significant and quite a significant finding, and kind of suggested that the hypothesis that the head of recruiting had was right. They translated this as a £4.4 million loss over the course of the year. So again, this is a big business problem now that they need to try and solve. The good news for the perspective of the head of recruiting and the people analytics team was that this got some serious attention from very senior business leaders who actually were happy to invest in actually improving the candidate experience. So they went away, they completely redesigned the candidate experience. What I really liked about this is they didn't just see this as an opportunity to save money. They saw this as an opportunity to potentially help the organization make money by providing such a good candidate experience. Not only did it stop customers canceling their subscriptions, it persuaded people who weren't customers but were applying for a job with Virgin Media to actually maybe become a customer of Virgin Media as well. So they worked out, by looking at good academic studies, that they could potentially convert 18% of non-customers into customers. It's worth around £5.6 million a year. So again, they didn't just see this as a way to save money, they saw this as a way to help the organization make money. This initiative coming from HR. Second example, who works in an organization that do engagement surveys? Annual engagement surveys, looking at, no? Okay, there's a few of you in there. So a lot of organizations are doing engagement surveys, and we know that it's moving to a more dynamic way of doing it, trying to do it on a more continual basis using new technologies and stuff like that. But Clark's is a big retail company in the UK. It's where people go to buy the shoes for their kids for school, basically. And they've got around 500 stores in the UK, and they've got stores elsewhere in the world as well. And the chief HR officer there wanted to understand, is engagement a leading indicator or a lagging indicator of business performance within our stores? I.e., does a rise in engagement drive better business performance in our stores? So they went away again, they combined data from HR and data from the business, and they found that actually within Clark's, a 1% increase in employee engagement actually drove a 0.4% increase in business performance, which on an annual basis, based on Clark's annual results, is around £68 million. So a big number. So armed with this insight, they then started to do some deeper analysis to understand what are the key drivers of employee engagement within our stores. And what great thing about retail is we can compare our high-performing branches, our medium-performing branches, and our low-performing branches. And they found two things. Number one, there was a whole thing around spans and layers. So i.e. the more people to a single manager, a unit manager or a deputy manager, the lower the engagement within that store. The other thing they found that was important was the tenure of the store manager themselves. So the longer the store manager had been in place, the more likely the engagement was being driven up within that store as well. And this made them think a little bit around a policy that they'd had before, is that they just high-performing managers and put them in low-performing stores to actually help drive up revenue within those stores. It did do that, but the negative impact on the high-performing store was actually higher. So the overall impact on revenue was negative. So again, that really helped them from that sort of process. But what it did as well, from this, they started putting really deep training programs in place for store managers, for deputy store managers, and aspiring store managers to really teach them the importance of engagement and how to drive that within their staff so they could try and drive more business performance through having a more engaged workforce. As I said, so those two business value ones there, but again, you can see that both of them have a benefit to either candidates or employees as well. And this is a big thing that we're seeing, I think, with people analytics. It isn't just about helping business leaders make more informed decisions around people, although it does do that. What it does as well, by using people analytics and providing data to managers, it helps support decision-making in the business. It helps managers make decisions about who they recruit, who they promote, but it also gives managers insights about their own behaviors and how their own behaviors can maybe have a positive or a negative impact on business performance, but also on engagement of their teams as well. Definitely helps employees, but it also helps HR. I think it helps HR really bring some value to the organization. It can help HR start to demonstrate the financial impact that it can have on businesses. And it helps support HR business partners in particular have more impactful discussions with their business leaders. So let's talk a little bit about the employees one. So back to that Accenture research that I talked about at the start. They also actually found that overwhelmingly 92% of employees are actually okay with their organizations processing their data, as long as they get some benefit from it. And I'd say this is probably the big trend, if you want to say, within people analytics, how increasingly the work of the teams is there to try and drive employee experience and employee wellness. So an example here is with Microsoft. So they had a hypothesis that we want to test, what makes a great manager within Microsoft. And they did this study within their engineering department in the US. They looked at email data and calendar data, not the content of emails, but the actual metadata, who sends emails to who, calendars, how many time are people spending in meetings, etc. They combine this with engagement data, and they then combine this with business data as well, performance data. And they found some interesting findings. Some of these findings are things that we as HR professionals have been telling business leaders for a long time. Some of them were a couple of other findings. So firstly, they found that managers who had highly engaged teams and performed better met regularly with their employees. Hey, who'd have thought? That they gave feedback, they met one-to-one with employees and gave employees time. And they also were receiving feedback as well. They also found that managers that, again, drove high engagement in their teams and better business performance held office hours. They were available to their teams during office hours. They weren't spending the whole day in meetings, and they were setting a good example as well around not working 20-hour days. I think as managers, we've all been guilty of that at times. They also found that managers that were perceived as being good managers by their employees were those that had large networks within Microsoft. Because the main reason for that is that those managers were helping their employees grow their own networks within Microsoft. And those of us who work for big organizations, I know this from my time at IBM, is that it's so important to have a great network within an organization, not only to help you to do work that you need to do now, but also to help you develop your career moving forward. And the other thing they found was this interesting thing around emails. So hands up who sends a lot of emails at the weekend, because that's when they catch up. Yeah? I will happily admit to this. And they found that managers at Microsoft did this as well. But they found it had a real negative impact on engagement, and also a negative impact on performance as well. And so much so that they actually measured that for every email a manager sent on a Sunday, it caused 20 minutes of work to every member on their team that was sent that email, which is quite a stark statistic, if you think that you might be sending 10 emails or 20 emails. And what the interesting thing about this is, what they've then put that into place, it made managers think about their own behavior. Just a small insight about not sending emails on a Sunday. So as a manager, you might actually still prepare the email, but you might then schedule for it to be sent on the Monday. And they even now have built within Outlook, and some of their customers are using this as well, a warning that if you're a manager and you're about to send an email on a Friday night or a Sunday, it actually prompts you to say, do you think this is a good idea to send this now? Would you like to schedule it instead? So again, quite a small insight, and a lot of analytics is about changing behaviors. So a good example there. So I'll leave you with this quote from Dave Ulrich, and I think it really emphasized the point that I was saying, that we've got to break out of our silos within HR, and analytics is a great opportunity to do this. HR analytics, people analytics, workforce analytics, talent analytics, whatever you want to call it, and it does have several names. I prefer people analytics personally. It's not about HR, but it's about stakeholder and business impact. And the only way you can do that is by working with your businesses to do that. And it's a great way to improve the impact of HR. So thank you very much. Please, if you like listening to podcasts with HR leaders, then do sign up to our podcast. And if you're interested in learning, there we have an academy at My HR Future as well, and there is a discount for anyone that was at this conference there, so feel free to check that out. Thank you very much.
David, thank you so much for setting the right context for the day. Ladies and gentlemen, a bigger round of applause for David. I'm going to quickly check if we can take 1 minute for questions. Ladies, yes? Let's take one question. Okay, first hand up. All right, here we go. Can we have a mic, a catch box?
Oh, it's a cube.
David.
Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yes.
Hi, I'm Niharika. I'm part of the HR professional at BlackRock, works here in Gurgaon. So you spoke about a lot of things about data, which is fantastic, great about listening about it. There's the other side of the data, which is data threat, data security, at times data breach. What's your view on that? Like when you're opening up for the data, for all the right reasons, there's another part of it as well. How mindful we should be about these things. I know it cannot be answered in a minute, but just probably a few seconds if you want to throw some light on that.
So you're talking about the ethics and the security and privacy around data.
Exactly.
And
right.
and we think about that because we think about some of the scandals that have happened on the consumer data side.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Great.
So interestingly, that Accenture survey, they found that 2/3 of employees were more worried about how their organizations were using their data in light of some of those consumer scandals.
Yeah.
So part of that wheel I had, the governance, ethics is in there. It is absolutely vital that we get this right. So I agree, it's very, very important. So I think organizations that are doing this well are actually quite transparent with their workforce around what data they're collecting, why they're collecting it, how they're making sure that only a certain people have access to it, possibly that actually no one can look at it on an individual level, so they're only looking at overall trends, so you can't necessarily tie it to one individual. But also, what is the benefit to the company, but the benefit to the workers as well of that data being collected? And I think that that transparency is very, very important. So that example I gave at the end on Microsoft, you know, a lot of us would probably think, I'm not sure I want my organization looking at email data, even the metadata on who I send emails to, let alone the content, which companies aren't necessarily looking at. But you can see the benefit to employees there as well, that if managers understand that sending loads of emails on a Sunday, for example, is actually bad for engagement. It's bad for our work-life balance as employees as well. So the fact that managers are doing that less within Microsoft is good for the employees. They also, as part of that technology, you get insights yourself as an employee around maybe how you're spending your time. You know, so you might get, did you know that you spent 7 hours, you know, on Thursday this week in meetings, and you spent 2 hours of that time sending emails? So maybe, you know, you might not need to be in that meeting, which again is something that helps from an employee perspective. And then the other thing I think we're seeing is this real drive, and you'll see some technology providers out there that are helping kind of personalize the employee experience. So using data, so in exchange for the employee giving up data around maybe what their career ambitions are within organizations, that employee is getting personalized learning recommendations, personalized job recommendations within that organization, maybe even highlighting 1 or 2 mentors that they might want to get in touch with, and they're actually helping them shape their career path within that organization as well. And to me, that seems a fair trade-off. The company get that data because it helps them with workforce planning, but the employee gets, you know, that data is then helping personalize their career path within the company.
All right, fantastic. David, I'm going to request you to present JBL headphones by Adobe to the lady who's asked us the first question of the day. Many congratulations. And ladies and gentlemen, let's hear it for David Green once again. Thank you so much, David.
Thank you.